Good afternoon. I'm Miguel de Jesus, and for my discussion board post, I chose the book Sacred Scripture, Sacred War, The Bible and the American Revolution, Chapter 2, which is titled The Lord is a Man of War, written by James P. Byrd. The main goal of this chapter seeks to relate the Bible's book of Exodus to the American Revolution, which, according to the author, allowed the colonists to believe that God was a man of war who justified armed action against the English crown. They also related that God chose George Washington to be their Moses, who led them across the bloody Red Seas of battle to independence, with a free American nation as their promised land. Throughout the war, political and religious figures across the colonies incorporated segments of Exodus in their speeches and sermons, more often than not focusing on Exodus 15:3, "The Lord is a warrior," NIV, just to justify to the masses that there was righteousness in the war against an oppressive English monarch. There was precedent in American history in the use of Exodus for military means prior to the Revolution. While 12 of the 13 colonies had standing militias required for the defense of the colonies, Philadelphia's pacifist government had no such requirements. So between 1747 and 1748, Benjamin Franklin and others argued for the formation of a volunteer militia within the state. A famous Presbyterian minister named Gilbert Tennent also argued for the creation of this militia association because he believed that the Lord is a man of war, citing the Old Testament in which he said much blood was shed therein by God's direction and with his approbation and blessing. Gannon 53. In Byrd's writing, the colonists were constantly accusing the British of savagery during the war. He wrote of the British, "They commanded a savage force that created martyrs everywhere. They wielded their weapons against the American faithful." Byrd 58. Although both sides could accuse the other of savagery, the level of violence was often a result of the ability or inability of leadership to command their troops. Some leaders didn't care, others were unable, but there were those who encouraged increased violence against the other. But there was also those who opposed it. One such example is British Lieutenant Colonel Archibald Campbell of the 71st Foot, who led the force that captured Savannah in 1778. While still aboard ship prior to capturing Savannah, he explained to his troops that they had come to relieve and protect His Majesty's loyal inhabitants, who have long withstood the savage oppression of Congress and accordingly gave strict instructions against plundering. Conway 388. Although Americans use Exodus as a frame of reference for religious justification, even in the context of God fighting on their side against slavery by the British Empire, the Bible also has something to say about that which seems to have conveniently been omitted. All who are under the yoke of slavery should consider their masters worthy of full respect, so that God's name and our teaching may not be slandered. 1 Timothy 6:1. So although they rebelled and claimed the authority, justification, and assistance of God, they may in fact have been slandering God's name by acting in a disobedient manner. Perhaps some English politicians and preachers were stating that exact thing across the Atlantic. While comparing the virtue of Washington with that of Moses, Byrd makes the comparison that, like Washington, Moses did not seize leadership of the people, he resisted it, only taking command when God demanded it. Byrd 68. And like Moses, upon Washington accomplishing his task of freeing America from England's grasp, he gave up that authority and the power that came with it, intent on retiring to his estate. That is until he was recalled to lead the nation once more. Today feels a little different than that time. Unlike the colonists whose Congress selected Washington based on experience, good standing, character, and geographic origins, America's today are dazzled by political campaigning. Today, presidential candidates do everything they can to seize leadership, even if it borders on the immoral or illegal side of the line. In fact, looking at the presidential campaign of 2016, the candidates collectively raised over $1.5 billion towards the election, an insane amount of money that could have been diverted towards greater needs in our nation. I leave you all with this final opinion. If our nation's forebears who agreed with rebelling, be they military, political, or religious leaders in nature, all truly believed that the American situation was so much like that of the Jews in Egypt, then how would they feel about the status of our great nation today? In my humble opinion, if I were to continue the biblical similarities between America today and the Jews of that ancient time, I would seriously consider Deuteronomy 32, verses 15 through 18. Jeshurun grew fat and kicked, filled with food. They became heavy and sleek. They abandoned the God who made them and rejected the rock their Savior. They made him jealous with their foreign gods and angered him with their detestable idols. They sacrificed to false gods, which are not God. gods they had not known, gods that recently appeared, gods your ancestors did not fear. You deserted the rock who fathered you. You forgot the God who gave you birth. Ponder this. Did we forget the God who gave our nation birth? In conclusion, Byrd does a good job of reinforcing the colonial theme of using Exodus and the idea of God as a man of war to justify their rebellion against what they viewed as an oppressive monarch, attempting to enslave them through the shackles of taxation without representation. Some may argue against the idea of God as a warrior, and although Byrd refers solely to Exodus in this chapter, I would also throw this in the mix as another supporting argument. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Ephesians 6:10-11. Thank you.